Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Eastern Area Planning. I'm Councillor Graham Pass, Chairman of the committee. Other members of the committee present are Councillors Alan Macro, Tony Linden, Jeff Mays, Richard Somner, Keith Woodhams and Jeremy Cottam, with Joe Stewart substituting, I believe for Councillor McKinnon. I have the following officers in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Beth Varco, our solicitor from Legal Services. Bob Dray has taken very much a back seat as our Development Control Manager because he is handing over as our new interim team leader. And may I congratulate and welcome Lydia Mather, who is here in that capacity. So be gentle with her. It's her first time as team leader. We will, of course, be relying heavily on her advice if need be. We also have Matthew Shepherd, our Senior Planning Officer, who will be presenting the item in front of us tonight. Ben Ryan, the clerk, and sadly to say, Thomas Dunn. Tom, you're our Zoom host, and this will be the last time you'll be our Zoom host, as I'm very sad to say you're leaving us. And I'd like to thank you at this stage for all the hard work you've done in organising us in this method of modern communication. You'll be missed, but thank you indeed. So before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the council chamber. Although there are no longer any formal restrictions regarding COVID-19, the council is continuing to adhere to safe working arrangements. The meeting is being live streamed even on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please may I ask everyone present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when invited to speak and to speak directly into them, and to switch them off, of course, when you've finished. Can I also make sure that you put your mobile phones on silent? And I think we've tested now that everyone has their sound turned off on their tablets. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which is no doubt in that corner over there, and follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is the car park in the Dolphin pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we'll remain seated and await instructions from our officers, and we'll adjourn the meeting until it is safe to proceed. Any questions, members? Are we fairly used to this now? So I will start with asking if there are any apologies. I think I have alluded to that. So Ben, please.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Ross McKinnon and with Joe Stewart in attendance as substitute. And we also have apologies from Councillor Alan Law.
Thank you very much. Members, minutes. Now, there are quite a lengthy set of minutes relating to the meeting held on the 24th of, no, it isn't, it's the 5th of October. Has anyone had a chance to read them? Because I am happy to propose that we defer my signing of these minutes till the next meeting. They only were made public to us about 24 hours ago. Councillor Woodhams.
Chairman, propose that we defer the minutes to be signed to the next meeting.
Is that seconded?
Yes, Chairman.
Right, and may I see hands of approval? Right, we will defer the minutes signing. It isn't you, Ben, I know, but I have commented that, to put it bluntly, we can't get umpteen pages of minutes 24 hours before and expect to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. So I think the point has been gently made. Members, declarations of interest, and I think I will start, and I'm sure I will do this for you en bloc. The applicant tonight, of course, was ex-councillor Chopping, whom we all know as a previous colleague of ours on this council. So do I take that as an en bloc declaration of interest? Are there any other declarations of interest of Councillor Mays?
Yes, Chairman. In addition, I also know that Penny Chopping, Keith's wife, and the daughter, Mrs. Jones.
Well, thank you. I think I know.
The same with.
But I think the same will go for all of us.
Yeah.
So thank you for keeping us all on the straight and narrow there. So can we just say we know the family and declare that interest? Councillor Stewart.
I think our guests might like to speak. They don't believe it is, Keith. And
it's not actually the application was done as a payment for our property. It's just so happens that Keith is my father. So, and it was on his land, so he's not actually the applicant, so I appreciate.
Well, all right, I will amend what I just said in that case. Thank you for your keeping us again on the straight and narrow. I'm always grateful. But it is ex-councillor Chopping's land, and therefore I think that our declaration, I think, has to stand. But I do take your point, he is not the applicant, and thank you for that. But it's just that we have to be seen to be open and honest, and that's what we're... Absolutely, we've got to tick all those boxes properly, and that's what we're trying to do. But thank you. So, without further ado, I will ask Matt Shepherd, please, to introduce the item. And as always, members, if there are any questions, if you keep a note, we do have the agent. As I'm into ex-councillor John Cornwall. Perhaps that's another interest we should declare. I remember him as one of our colleagues.
Remember now.
Yeah, well, all right.
I'd like to
a lot of us
confirm-
remember ex-councillor John Cornwall from this chamber. So perhaps we could add that to the declarations as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you,
Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application tonight is application number 22/01062 FULD for the conversion and extension of an existing outbuilding to form a single dwelling at Shortheath House and Shortheath Lane. The application has been called to Planning Committee by Councillor Ross McKinnon. If the officer is likely to recommend refusal, the officer's recommendation is for refusal, and therefore it's come before you tonight. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation. So we'll head through the slides quickly just to refresh your memory of the site. So first slide up is the location plan. So we can see the blue line of associated land, so land under ownership. The red line is the development site in the centre of that slide. Moving in closer, we can see the block plan of the proposed dwelling, Shortheath House, just there in the centre. We have the proposed dwelling just off. The grey line denotes the curtilage. The red line shows the development site. And you see the grey access track that we parked in during the site visit, showing enough parking to serve the dwelling, also adjacent to the proposed dwelling in the centre of that plan. Moving forward to refresh your memory in terms of the existing elevations as shown here. So it's a stable barn at the moment, and the proposed development to raise the ridge line, add in the two-storey extension to the front elevation and the sunroom running alongside, to the south elevation. Heading through our site visit photos from back in the summer, so we can see the barn here, the materials used, the area in front of the stable doors is where the sunroom will go. Moving to the side elevation and of the barn, we can see the bricks just to the right-hand side of that photo show you where the two-storey extension, the extent of that two-storey extension will come to. Moving through just to show you the detail of the barn, its existing use. Again, just to show you the boundary treatments and the side elevations to show you the relationship to the outside of the countryside. This image shows you the relationship to the existing dwelling on site. So the proposed development will be a dwelling by itself. So there is an element that the neighbouring amenity must be compliant with policy and not harmful. The outlook of the dwelling into the curtilage. And then we show again, just the side elevation to show you where the sunroom will run along adjacent to, just behind where the applicants are standing in that photo. We can see the bricks laid out in that image to show you where the two-storey extension will be. And then last off, just to note the TPO tree on site is subject, that the tree officer has no objections to. It won't be lost, it will be retained and protected. Could be protected if you look to approve it through conditions. And on that side. So I'll head through the report now. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. So it should be noted in the planning history, application 2020-413 is the conversion of the existing outbuilding to form a single dwelling, including provision of off-street parking. So the dwelling itself is already permitted to be converted without any conversion or extension to be a dwelling by itself. Moving to the statutory consultees, there are no objections from our highways officers, tree officers, no response from the parish council on this. The site is located outside of defined settlement boundaries and therefore in open countryside. Just moving to the issues in terms of neighbouring amenity, the officers are content with the relationship between the proposed dwelling and the existing dwelling on site. There are no highways objections. There is adequate parking on site. The proposed development is not within a flood zone, so there's no concerns in terms of flooding and drainage. Previously, the application came to planning committee and was deferred for a further BAT survey to be undertaken. This BAT survey was undertaken, submitted to officers. Officers are content with the findings of that survey, and the mitigation suggested in there can be conditioned. So that reason for refusal was removed and has been removed. Moving to the crux of the issue with this development is the principle. Policy C4 states that conversions of redundant buildings in the countryside will be permitted for residential use, provided they meet a list of criteria. That criteria is in 5.4 of my report. Officers are concerned that the proposed development is not capable of being converted without substantial rebuilding, extension or alteration. So the policy does not define what substantial extension or alteration is, but it does add in the supporting text that it is expected that any building works will be relatively minor and will involve using matching materials. Case officer is concerned that raising the ridge height by 0.8 meters is considered a substantial alteration. The construction of this will be to remove the ridge to increase that height. So the very intricacies of that building will be changed, altered and increased. That will be increased across the whole of the agricultural building, and therefore case officers feel that is a substantial change. There is a two-storey extension to the southern elevation. This is 5 meters deep. It's to provide a larger principal bedroom at first floor. The extension will be for a this would be extended for a width of 5.7 meters and would have a ridge height of 6.8 meters. So quite a substantial two-storey extension, again, in conflict with the policy. Proposed development would also include a 2-meter wide sunroom lobby running the length of the southern elevation. Again, another substantial extension to the building. Case officers have included in 5.10 of the report figures in terms of the increase of the footprint and floor space. So there'll be a 50% increase in footprint and a 23% increase in floor space. These figures are provided to quantify the level of change. There's no hard and fast and no set rules for what is an acceptable size. It's all taken on its own merits. Officers are concerned with these 3 sections of development. They would cause a substantial extension and alteration in conflict with criteria 1 of policy C4. This conflict would then have a change to the existing character of the agricultural barn, changing it into from an existing modest rural barn to a large dwelling of modern character with a degree of glazing in there and quite a substantial extension. So there would be a loss of the original character of the rural barn, the agricultural barn, and a change to a more modern dwelling, which case officers find is unacceptable and is in conflict with criteria 6 of C4. As explained, the scheme substantially alters the external appearance of the building in terms of character and how it looks. It's considered to have an adverse impact on the character of the existing barns and would not comply with the criteria. There is substantial extensions and alterations, and the case officer is recommending, therefore, the application be refused in accordance with the refusal reason listed at the end of my report. There is nothing to add on the update sheet. So that is my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. We have no parish representative, nor do we have objectors, nor supporters even, but we do have the agent, Mr. Cornwall. Mr. Cornwall, please come to the dais. I'm sure you remember you have a button to the right of the console there. You have up to 5 minutes. If you're still talking at, well, shall I give you a minute to go? Yes. We'll do a minute to go. I'm just looking around. Has anyone got the stopwatch? I'll use my phone. I'll use my phone. It's all right. Just give me 1 second, please, and I will be able to time you, possibly. There we are, clock. Right. Your time starts when you speak, Mr. Cornwall.
Okay, Chairman, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, if Chairman, can I just say, if I start coughing, it's because I'm getting over COVID. I'm not transmissible. I got a negative test on Sunday, but it's still hanging about. All right. So
I empathise.
My apologies if that happens. Since we last met, Chairman, the issue's resolved itself, as your officer said, down to just the policy C4 issue. And the core point of policy C4 is to ensure really that there is no adverse effects on the surrounding countryside, either individually or from cumulative developments, from altering redundant agricultural buildings. And that's a wholly legitimate planning objective. No problem with that at all. And policies are important, but there will always be exceptions to policies. I mentioned last time, even in metropolitan greenbelt, which is a much more stringent policy than this, there are exceptions. Not many, it's true, but there are. So you have to look at the particular issues in the particular case. I know members often get really worried because they get, they say, well, policy is important, and if we go against it, we'll set a precedent, and then people will come banging on our doors saying, well, you let that one go, what's the matter with this? Well, it's easy to answer it in this case, because this building, as those who went on the site visit know, can't be seen from any public vantage point whatsoever, not at all. So it doesn't have any adverse impact on the countryside. There is an impact on the existing build, on the building over and above what's already been granted. That's absolutely true. And I set out the reasons for that. It was really to enlarge the development, enlarge what had already been approved, to facilitate a home office, because in the interim COVID had happened, and everything has shifted to home working now, and the applicant's husband works from home now almost entirely. That was a real driver of it. So that's what caused the proposal. I note on the table, I take these. I didn't actually work out the footprint for myself. I'll take Mr. Shepherd's calculations as accurate. But the 50% increase in footprint, that's significant. But the one thing I would say, because he says in paragraph 513, the sunroom element would add glazing, which would alter the appearance of the building. Well, we actually thought that was a good thing, because the glazing goes right across the front so that you can look through and you see the original elevation. And if this was a listed building, the conservation officer would be giving us plaudits for doing that. We're not obliterating the existing building. So yes, it's a footprint extension, but it in a way it's not, because it's allowing you to see through to the original building. So our view is that this is an acceptable exception to an entirely legitimate policy, and we would ask you to take that into account. Is there anything you'd like to add, really?
It has to be through you, Mr. Cornwall. I'm afraid
Right,
you're the only
okay.
one registered to speak.
Anything? Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yes, okay. Yes, under the original approval, of course, the consent removed permitted development rights, so you couldn't have had an extension in the garden or anything like that. So that's another thing that drove this proposal. I'm told that both parties work from home too, so that's another. I mean, no personal circumstances aren't overriding in these things. Yeah, that's fine. Unless there are any questions that members have for me, that's all I wish to say.
Okay, right, members. Any questions for Mr. Cornwall? Councillor Woodhams.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Cornwall, is there a planning policy for cannot be seen? I mean, for many years, people have told us that you can't see it, but there's not a planning policy for something that you can't see. And it can be seized on by other architects, agents and applicants.
Yeah.
Well, you passed that one because the agent said you can't see it.
Yes.
Well, I don't think we can accommodate that view.
Well, you can. You can. There are always exceptions to policies. You have to go behind. You have to go behind what the meaning of the policy is. The meaning of this policy is to prevent individual extensions and alterations to redundant buildings, either individually or there may be several of them cumulatively, having an impact on an area. I mean, if this, let me give you a simple example. If this building was on the roadside, say 200 yards away on Short Heath Lane, and it was right on the roadside, I wouldn't have an argument because I couldn't stand here and say that would not have an impact. It would clearly have a visual impact, but this one doesn't. The members who went on the site visit were painfully aware of that. It is quite remarkable. I've lived in that village for 36 years. I've walked around there once or twice, sometimes 3 times a week, just for a walk. And I didn't even know there was a house in there. Believe it or not, I didn't know Councillor Chopping lived in there until about 2 years ago. I mean, it's just completely contained. So that you can have exceptions to policies on that basis, because it isn't contravening what is the underlying essentials of that policy.
One further question, Councillor Woodhams, of course.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask you if you took advantage of the planning pre-apps service?
Well, yes, actually, when we came to the last committee, the chairman recommended that we discuss the proposals with the officers. The following day, I sent an email to the officers saying, extend the decision period to the end of October to enable the back report to be done. And also, in the light of what the chairman asked for last night, would you like to discuss it? And I gave my details. And I got no response from that. They obviously weren't happy to discuss. When I sent the back report in, I did the same thing, made the same request. I'm not making a big issue of this. I know you're short of planning officers. I know they're under terrible pressure. I understand that. But so the answer is we tried to, but it just didn't happen. It's as simple as that. Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? If you could just, as I remind you, indicate by your physical hand, not your Zoom hand, I'd be grateful. Are there any other questions? Looking around. We'll let you off lightly. Thank you.
Thank you,
We sadly don't have the ward member, Councillor McKinnon, here. So, members, are there any questions for our officers before we enter debate? Oh, Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was rather concerned that several of the council departments have not responded to this application. And I'm particularly concerned about the ecology officer being, as one of the issues was bats of the wildlife. Is there any particular reason why this hasn't been responded to?
Mr. Shepherd, can you assist?
So that'd be an error in my report. The ecologist, we've spoken about it and he's provided conditions, he's reviewed it. So it should say that he should have no objection subject to conditions.
Thank you. So I would like to kind of register my objection to the fact that other departments haven't replied, even if it was just to say no comment or to say to repeat what they said last time.
Yeah, it's surprising not to have a response from the parish council. That very rarely happens. In terms of our archaeologists, the lead local flood authority, they've screened it out. It's not in the flood zone or anything like that. So there's little for them to comment on or respond to on that side as well.
Still on questions to officers. Any other questions before I ask someone to start the debate? I'm still looking around. I see no more hands going up. Well, members, I'm going to ask someone to start the debate. Just gently. Oh, Councillor Woodhams. Well, just before you do, I was just going to say a couple of words. Members, you've all read the report very keenly, and I'm sure you've read the relevant policy 5 on page 9, 5.4, the policy C4. Let me remind you that, and I'm saying this very kindly and gently, so please bear with me, we as a planning committee cannot make policy. Clearly that is not our remit, but we can interpret policy with good reason. That's not a steer. I'm just implying to you that we have some words on this piece of paper here on policy C4, which on the face of it looks fairly black or white, but it is for us, we have the power and ability to interpret policy, provided that, and I will quote the agent when he spoke, that it doesn't create a precedent. As I say, I'm just giving you some words to try to guide you gently to start with, but let's see how the debate comes on, and I will ask Councillor Woodhams to start.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to quote some key elements from the agenda papers, taking you to page 9, 5.6, states this current proposal is not considered to comply with criteria 1 of policy C4 due to the development, including substantial extension and alteration. 5.7 states and clarifies this point by adding, as the proposal is changing the overall form of the roof, it is considered a substantial alteration. Page 11, 5.15 states, the proposed development is not considered to comply with criteria 1 and 5 of policy C4. Policy C4 is written in such a way that each individual criteria must be met for the development to comply with the policy. The principle of development is not considered to be acceptable in accordance with policy C4. Further, page 11, 5.2.1 states, the proposed development is therefore not considered to be in keeping with the rural character of the area. The alterations and extensions to the barn create a large dwelling of modern design rather than retaining the modestly proportioned barn's character and rural aesthetic. And finally, Chairman, 5.22 states the development is therefore not considered to comply with the aforementioned policies. And then on page 14, you have the refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm looking for other hands to add to this debate. Give an alternative view. Councillor Cottam.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Woodhams. Yes, there is always you can make considerations of the actual application itself. And if it was just one item, I think I would agree with that. But there are several points here which officers have put. And as you've rightly said in the past, we are a policy-led council, and this committee is policy-led. So I don't think, as it is, I could support this. I would support the officer's recommendation.
Well, I'm not asking for a proposal yet. I'm still seeking debate. Members? Councillor Stewart.
You were waiting for me to.
Oh, I was waiting for someone, certainly, and thank you for it being you.
Can you switch off your mic? So this is a really interesting one. I've looked at, I didn't have the opportunity to go on the site visit because as substitute, I wasn't asked to attend. And so what I've done is I've taken some time to look on Google Maps, wonderful thing that we have, so that I could get an impression of the location of the properties and to see the correlation and the sort of interrelationship between the two of them, which is quite interesting. I hadn't realised quite how close they are to one another, but that isn't being discussed tonight, but just an observation. And looking at the previous application that was approved, and I understand the applicant has said about the reasons for changing this to accommodate people that are working from home. We're all doing very, very similar, and some of us don't have that opportunity to be able to extend and be able to accommodate it. But when I look at the previous plan and this plan, I have to say this is extremely opportunistic, it feels like. So it isn't just a case of allowing some space for two of the residents or whoever to be able to work from home. There are a lot more additions here, it feels like. So the previous application had bedrooms, and that hasn't been changed. There are still the same number of bedrooms in this new application, but all of these other extras. So I'm a little bit in conflict with what we've just been told, because it doesn't feel like it is just about trying to accommodate the fact that working arrangements are now different. But I'd be really interested to hear what others think before I make my decision.
So would I indeed, thank you. Can others give us their opinions? I'm looking to my right, Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman. I've had a good think about it. I was at the site as well, and admittedly, even during the winter, you wouldn't be able to see it at all. I know the property reasonably well because of former councillor Chopping in terms of the Conservative group. I mean, obviously, 0.8 metres is not a huge height differential, but of course it is, if you look at the design, particularly the amount of windows is a different sort of character to the not the rear elevation, the front elevation. It is fairly different from the existing building. And I suppose it does have an effect. I mean, the rear elevation seems, fairly close to the original building. There is some differences, obviously, with the brickwork and everything else. So I'm really toying on the idea, because sometimes in the past we have gone against policy for a marginal change, and I think it's the amount of proportion for that, and that's something which is lingering in my mind as we speak with hearing the debate, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Anyone else wish to continue with the debate before I look for a proposal? Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. It's as difficult this time as it was last time, isn't it?
Apart from the bats, yes.
It really is. Yes, apart from the bats. Because I absolutely take on board what's been said about policy, and I absolutely uphold the fact that as an authority we are where we are because of the policies that we've got in place, and they are good policies. I think that the one thing that I've repeatedly said in times that I've been sitting on planning committee is that the whole point of us being here as a committee is that we look at stuff by exception. The policies drive us to that point, and the committee allows us to be there to review, to discuss, debate, and look at mitigating factors. Personally, I think there are mitigating factors in this one, and I think the location is the key thing. I don't think we're looking at something that is directly opposed to policy, so much as not quite meeting policy interpretation. I absolutely uphold where we are with officers' interpretation of our policies, and I can absolutely understand why we're sitting here discussing this application tonight, not least of which because Councillor McKinnon called it in. But I'm looking at the application on in its own merits. I'm looking at the location of the property, and I'm looking at what the agent, applicants, owners are trying to achieve. And I'm actually quite sympathetic to what they're trying to achieve and what could be a fantastic building, a fantastic dwelling in that location. I'll hold there for now, Chairman. Thank you.
I understand your words, which is what I was trying to allude to when I gave you the introduction, that we have our policies which are there to certainly guide us. They're absolutely to guide us, because otherwise they wouldn't be policies. And in order to vote for something that is against a policy, we have to ensure that we can make a judgment here that in our judgment it is not against that policy, or can be an exception to that policy in terms of, for example, looking at a word and saying, well, substantial, what does substantial mean, and is this substantial in the meaning of that policy? We can't just say, well, it's okay, it's against policy, but that doesn't matter. But we have to qualify, if we are to approve it, that it goes, that we can justify it within that. But again, I'm just trying to give you some words that I got from officers before this meeting to offer you some guidance from the chair. So Councillor Macro, and then I will be looking for a proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I disagree with Councillor Somner, actually. This does go against at least two of the reasons in our policy C4. And also, the agent says that the site can't be seen, which I mentioned is true. I wasn't able to attend the site visit. However, things might change in the future. A lot of the area around here is wooded, and we've recently lost a lot of trees due to various diseases which have come in from abroad. So if there might unfortunately be a situation in the future where this building does become more visible, so I think we shouldn't be just saying we can't see it and leave it to that. I think we do need to be concerned about the deviations from policy in the officer's report, and I will be voting against this, Mr. Chairman.
I will allow Councillor Somner to come back, then I'm looking for a proposal.
Be remiss not to come back on a couple of those comments, I think. Firstly, that I think it was said earlier on by the officer that there is no strict definition of substantial, therefore we're looking at interpretation. And the other thing was, putting aside a crystal ball, if we were looking to what might be in the future, then we wouldn't let anything go through, because everything will be overlooking somebody else, everything will be in somebody else's way, and everything will be contrary to what might be coming up in the future. We can't do that. All we can look at is the application in front of us and where we are now. We also know, because we've experienced it through the local plan process so far, that national policies change quickly and we have to adapt. So we have to be looking at where we are now, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. I think virtually all of us have had a say. Councillor Woodhams, well, Councillor Woodhams, you can make a proposal.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm happy to make a proposal based on the full recommendation for refusal on page 14. Thank you.
Find a second. Councillor Cotton?
I'd like to second that.
Right. Is there anything officers wish to add before I go to the vote? Looking at my new team leader.
Just on the derogation test for the ecology, whether you could delegate to officers for an informative on that, should there be an appeal? If that's acceptable.
Right, we're happy to do that.
Is that giving protection to the tree that we mentioned?
No.
Could we
No, not the
include
tree,
that,
ecology. We can include an informative if you, yeah.
please?
Yeah.
Right. So I have a proposal of refusal, which has been seconded. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against, please show. 2. Sorry, the item's refused. Members, before we close the meeting, are there any appeals or any other comments that officers wish to make? No. In that case, Tom, could you advise when the meeting is now is closed, please?